Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hello, and thank you for listening, whether it's on America One Radio, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, their websites, their apps, or if you podcast, thank you for doing so. Last night, obviously, big news coming out of New York City. Democratic primary held, and Zohran Mamdani won the Democratic primary against former and disgraced New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Now, as is the case on the left, there is a lot of reaction and a lot of, I believe, overreaction as well. I'm as excited as anybody that a progressive, a democratic socialist, is now in a position to win such a marquee race. But he just won a primary. Just the primary. That's all he's won. There's still work to be done for that candidacy and for the Democratic Party, which begs the question, what will New York City Democrats do? Eric Adams, now running as an independent, is running for re-election. Will that create some fraction within the Democratic voter base? Plenty for New York City political pundits to discuss. I am not one of them. I'm not an expert on New York City politics. I'm just sitting here watching this from afar with some interest because I think there can be lessons to learn from this primary campaign. But I also caution those who want to read too much into it and extrapolate what there is to know about it for New York City and take it nationally, or bring it here to Georgia even. The city of Atlanta, where, by the way, we're in the throes of the early municipal campaign as well, although filing deadlines coming up and fundraising began long ago. If anybody in the weeds is out there looking to run against the incumbent Mayor Andre Dickens, and they're excited about Zohran Mamdani's results last night, that person needs to come forward pretty soon. Actually, there probably are. In fact, I will say it. You're late, unless you're quietly collecting money somewhere. Which obviously there's FEC issues that have to be answered. Nonetheless, what do we learn from this? We'll dive into that in just a little bit. First, I want you to listen to Mamdani giving his primary victory speech last night before supporters.
Today, 8 months after launching this campaign, with the vision of a city that every New Yorker could afford, we have won.
Oh, a primary.
We have won from Harlem to Bay Ridge. We have won from Jackson Heights to Port Richmond. We have won from Maspeth to Chinatown. We have won because New Yorkers have stood up for a city they can afford. A city where they can do more than just struggle. One where those who toil in the night can enjoy the fruits of their labor in the day. Where hard work is repaid with a stable life. Where 8 hours on the factory floor or behind the wheel of a cab is enough to pay the mortgage. It is enough to keep the lights on. It is enough to send your kid to school. Where rent-stabilized apartments are actually stabilized. Where buses are fast and free. Where childcare doesn't cost more than CUNY. And where public safety keeps us truly safe. And it's where the mayor will use their power to reject Donald Trump's fascism.
Okay.
To stop mass ICE agents from deporting our neighbors. And to govern our city as a model for the Democratic Party. A party where we fight for working people with no apology. A life of dignity should not be reserved for a fortunate few. It should be one that city government guarantees for each and every New Yorker.
So what do you take from this that you can extrapolate and take nationally? I don't know, honestly. I will say this. There are names that came to my mind here just in the state of Georgia. Representative Gabriel Sanchez, an upstart Democratic socialist serving in the state legislature. In fact, I reached out to him for a reaction. He's a tough one to pin down. Good guy, and I'm happy he's doing well. He's also, I think sort of prioritizing his life outside of the General Assembly, and I can't quarrel with that. Representative Ruha Rahman, one of his compatriots in the House, she actually campaigned for Zohran Mamdani in New York City. In fact, from the Politically Georgia blog a day or two ago, a familiar Georgia face on the campaign trail in New York promoting Zohran Mamdani's bid for mayor in New York City. Zohran is someone worth all the work, said State Representative Ruha Rahman, Duluth Democrat. We need more Zohrans who not only care and have the right values, but are just as passionate about building the right infrastructure to make those values a reality. I have as well reached out to Representative Rahman to see if she'd like to join me, and maybe in the next day or so she will. She was at the No Kings event in Philadelphia. She campaigned in New York City. She could be traveling for all I know. She's also a runner, and I know the runners like to run early in the morning before the stifling heat gets to be too much. So we'll give her some grace on that. Today's Politically Georgia blog dives into the Mamdani race and what could be gleaned from it. Greg Bluestein, Tia Mitchell, Patricia Murphy, Adam Beam, all on the byline here. Zohran Mamdani's stunning upset in New York City's mayoral primary sent shockwaves far beyond the 5 boroughs that could embolden more like-minded liberals to challenge establishment figures across the nation. Like-minded liberals challenging establishment figures. Again, Atlanta's mayoral race right now features one prominent candidate, and it's the incumbent. An incumbent who, by a lot of measures, on the ground, is not the most popular incumbent. Whether it's those who are upset about transit issues not being built upon in this city, whether it's the Cop City protesters, the grassroots organizers who put together 115,000 signatures on petitions that were never qualified for a ballot measure that never happened now that the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility is open, whether it be those who have questions about a mayor who hopped on a plane to fundraise in Memphis for his friend running for re-election for mayor there in the midst of Atlanta's water crisis. There's a lot of meat on that bone, but there's no candidate delivering that meat. Back to the Politically Georgia blog. The little-known state legislator and Democratic socialist toppled former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo with a progressive platform centered on a promise of generational change and a more confrontational approach to GOP policies, echoing demands from the left in Georgia. The Politically Georgia bloggers continue. Some see a warning in Mamdani's victory for party leaders hesitant to embrace a more populist, progressive message. Oh, man, were we not just talking with Jim Kessler, the vice president of policy at Third Way Democrats? We were just talking about this, how cautious Democrats need to be at ignoring populism when it gathers tens of thousands of people, for example, at rallies in red states and red counties, MAGA country, congressional districts by the likes of Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who, by the way, endorsed Mamdani. The AJC Politically Georgia bloggers continue. In Georgia, a new generation of Democrats is challenging the old guard. Representative David Scott from Atlanta, facing growing crowd of primary challengers. In addition, activists are encouraging Democratic incumbents from Senator John Ossoff to low-level politicos to take a tougher line against President Donald Trump. It's so clear the Democratic base is hungry for not only change, but bold ideas that center their basic needs. The electorate isn't demanding moderation either. Again, Representative Ruha Rahman, who campaigned for Mamdani in New York, was quoted as saying, "It just wants people willing to fight for them." Yes. Mamdani, age 33, that's pretty remarkable too, pledged to freeze rent on regulated apartments, raise taxes on wealthiest New Yorkers, and fight Trump's immigration policies, a platform that helped energize younger voters to surge to the polls. Now, and here's the reality. Again, not being an expert on New York City politics and knowing how these things work, this was a ranked choice election, by the way, and there were coalitions made. So it's not as if Mamdani just won outright on first ballot. There were coalitions built with other mayoral candidates in this primary that had to be worked out so that, campaign ads were made. Oh, if you're going to choose me, choose this guy second, and vice versa. So there was a lot of back scratching there. But there's also this. Again, the incumbent, Eric Adams, knowing that he was not popular within the Democratic Party after his antics in 2024, is running as an independent. So you'll have Mamdani versus Eric Adams and a Republican, Curtis Sliwa. Sliwa ran in 2021, so he's got a organization, he's got a base there, and it'll be interesting to see, as they write here, what more moderate Democrats will do. Could they revolt against their party's nominee? All of that will be interesting to see. The question I have, and again, I don't even know if this is a lesson to learn so much as is this the canary in the coal mine? Is this the telegram sent around the world? Remember the scene from Independence Day? Send the message to everyone around the world what to do, how we did it, and blah, 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 take down those ships. This is what'll be curious. Does this signal to some underdog waiting in the wings here in Atlanta, for example, to challenge an incumbent, a party incumbent who seems to like oligarchical ties because look at all the money that went into not just his campaign coffers. I mean, he's raking it in. Mayor Andre Dickens is doing quite fine and already throwing out the mayoral signs, despite the fact that no one's really running against him. I mean, you get the money, you got to spend the money, right? But there was a lot of money behind the Atlanta Police Foundation and the Public Safety Training Facility, and he's aligned with that. And again, someone in his position who has a grassroots base already distanced from him, unhappy with him. Then you throw in the transit issue, the fact that he has kicked Beltline Rail back at least another decade. There are a lot of dissatisfied liberal and progressive Atlantans who couldn't be bothered to vote for that guy. The only problem is if there's no one else on the ballot, what does it matter? So will someone step forward? That's what I think could come from the Mamdani primary victory to look out for. If that someone sees that as an example of a progressive populist movement in a major city, a blue city, it's no question that New York is a liberal city. It's no question that Atlanta is a liberal city. The question is there a movement in Atlanta strong enough to do what Mamdani did in taking down a disgraced former governor and Andrew Cuomo running for mayor, to do the same thing here in the city of Atlanta with an incumbent mayor who isn't all that popular left of center? He might be as popular in the center. He might be fairly popular right of center, comparable to how popular he is left of center. That's what I'm going to be looking out for. That's what I take from last night's victory. This is The Ron Show, America One Radio and Progressive Voices via TuneIn. You can follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms at Ron Show ATL, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads. Oh, God, I'm terrible about Threads. If I post to Instagram, it goes to Threads. I know that. Substack, I should do that. I don't know why. It's because when I get around to putting the blog together, the show notes that go with each cast, I'm already doing this. Let's see. It has to go to the website. It has to go to Spotify. So it goes to podcasts. It goes to SoundCloud. I do that. And then I put it on Daily Cost. And Substack. That's one more thing I just need to do. I'm talking to myself. I'm coaching myself up. I have people who hit me up all the time. What you need is a social media expert. You need somebody who does this for you. And I'm happy to do that for this amount per month. thank you, but that's a lot, and I'm already shelling out of pocket to put this show on, unfortunately. And that would also be my cue to say to you, the listener, if you enjoy this show, if you appreciate the work that I'm doing, and thank you so much for listening. I know that in and of itself is showing appreciation. Grassroots journalism, and I hesitate to use that word because I'm not a college graduate with a journalism degree. I'm just a citizen journalist, I guess you would say, in some like a citizen patrolman, I guess would be. I'm not a cop, but I'm a citizen journalist. I would say support this show if you can with little campaign coffer contribution there. Let me rattle the tin cup a little bit. That's actually my coffee mug. You can visit ronshow.atl.com and make a contribution. And by the way, thank you, Lee. I saw your monthly contribution drop. I appreciate that you helped this show so much. Speaking of aiding citizen journalists, Mario Guevara. We all know that he was recently arrested on No King's Day in DeKalb County. First Amendment groups are making some noise about this. Maya Holman with the Georgia Recorder reporting that these First Amendment groups are pushing for his release. And the story goes, several organizations dedicated to preserving free speech and protecting members of the press are calling for the release of a prominent immigration reporter who was detained while covering a protest in Atlanta earlier this month and is now on track to be deported. We played the audio of his confrontation, air quotes, with police and noted that he got arrested because he had wandered onto the street one too many times. The problem is he had to wander onto the street to avoid tear gas plumes. Now, who fired those? 3 guesses. The police. Anyway, Holman continues. Mario Guevara, an Emmy award-winning Spanish language reporter. I didn't know he'd won Emmys. That's amazing. Based in Metro Atlanta, was initially charged with improperly entering a roadway, obstruction of law enforcement officers, and unlawful assembly, all of which were misdemeanors. An immigrant from El Salvador, Guevara had been a legal resident of the U.S. for more than 20 years. However, the misdemeanor charges after his arrest allowed Immigration and Customs Enforcement to place a detainer on him, paving the way for potential deportation. Now, why would ICE want to swoop in and proactively deport someone who's, I don't know, reporting on their ICE raids? What would motivate them? Holman continues, he was later transferred into ICE custody and charged with 3 additional misdemeanors from the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office for distracted driving, failure to obey a traffic control device, and reckless driving, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Just piling on. Body camera footage obtained by the AJC showed Guevara wearing both a helmet and vest, marking him as a member of the press as he was arrested. Alarming free speech advocates. He had been covering a protest against the Trump administration's immigration policies. At the time of his arrest, Guevara was wearing a press vest and clearly identified himself to law enforcement. That from Catherine Jacobson of the nonprofit organization Community to Protect Journalists. She wrote that in a letter to DeKalb County Chief Executive Officer Lorraine Cochran Johnson. We have reached out to the CPJ, by the way, and to DeKalb CEO Lorraine Cochran Johnson to weigh in on this. Video footage indicates that Guevara was in no way obstructing police activity, but rather documenting the protest, a matter of public interest. In a letter to U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, shouting into the void, the Committee to Protect Journalists and other free press advocates, including the Atlanta Press Club, the Georgia First Amendment Foundation, and the Georgia chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists, urged her to facilitate Guevara's release. We request that he be released on bond and that removal proceedings against him, which were triggered by 3 misdemeanor charges that seem to conflict with his First Amendment rights as a journalist, be dropped unequivocally and immediately, according to the letter. If Guevara's case proceeds, it would represent a grim erosion of both freedom of the press and the rule of law. Welcome to the Trump presidency. Journalists who are not U.S. citizens could be at risk of deportation solely because local law enforcement filed misdemeanor charges against them in retaliation for reporting without those charges ever being tried in court. Bingo. Department of Homeland Security's official account disputed media coverage of the arrest in a post on the social media site X and confirmed that Guevara, quote, was turned over to ICE custody and has been placed in removal proceedings. Maya Holman concludes her story. Guevara is currently being held at the Folkston ICE Processing Center in South Georgia, which is said to become the largest immigrant detention facility in the United States. His legal team did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Oh, which reminds me, we've reached out to Guevara's attorney as well, and he and I DM'd on Facebook a little bit. He was traveling to No, Denver. He was traveling to Denver for something, and we just seem to have lost touch a little bit. But we'll try and get Giovanni on at some point in time to discuss Guevara's case. Incidentally, Lataro Greenspan, who has been covering this story relentlessly for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, also filed a story that dropped yesterday. The headline, "People Sleeping on Floors in Crowded Georgia ICE Jail," former detainee says. Let me give you the introduction to that story. I've got a hard break coming up here in like 40 seconds, so we'll have to continue. Earlier this spring, Dalton residents Jose Arias Tovar and his teenage daughter Ximena were both housed in Georgia's Stewart Detention Center, one of the largest immigration jails in the country. Being reunited with his wife and children wasn't the only reason Arias Tovar said he was happy to be released on bond last month. There was also the relief of getting out of what he described as a facility so overcrowded that he was forced to sleep on a bare concrete floor about half the time during his 4-week detention. I don't know if I even need to tell you this. When you get to be a certain age or a certain size, sleeping on a concrete floor ain't good for the back. We'll pick up on this conversation when the Ron Show returns. America One Radio and Progressive Voices via TuneIn.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Well, covering lots of ground today, whether it be the reaction, overreaction, maybe hyperbolization of the New York City mayoral primary race. What do we learn from that? What can be gleaned from that for the city of Atlanta and its mayoral race coming up here this November? The deadline to qualify for that race, August 21st. And there are no viable opponents for the incumbent Mayor Andre Dickens. I know there's the one guy. There is a gay Republican, I kid you not, running a campaign. Have I reached out to him? No, I haven't. And maybe that's irresponsible of me. But I actually have been working to try and coordinate some shows with some of the city council candidates. And I really need to get on that because there's so many of them. I think I have like 3, 4, 5 people running just from my area here in Atlanta. I live in the second district. Nonetheless, we were also talking about the recent arrest of El Salvadoran journalist Mario Guevara, who had been in the U.S. legally for some 20 years or whatever, and the First Amendment advocates who are calling for his release on those, let's be honest, flimsy charges levied against him. And also the facility that he is residing in Folkestone currently, where there are those who just got out of this facility, a couple of Dalton ICE detainees, who speak of the inhuman conditions that they're staying in that facility. Back to Lataro Greenspan's reporting on that. As ICE has stepped up arrests since the start of Donald Trump's second administration, including of immigration violators who do not have other criminal charges or convictions, space inside the agency's detention facilities is running scarce. That appears to be the case at Stewart, the detention facility we spoke of in Folkestone, Georgia, according to data collected by the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse at Syracuse University. The people actually try to fight to get a bed because 30 people just sleeping in the concrete floor. So the situation there is crazy. Arias Tovar said in English during a recent interview. 2 toilets, 2 showers for many persons. You get people, they take a shower at 3 a.m. because they don't have time to do it in the day, he added. They don't have enough food. It's too much people now. I think it's important that these stories get told because I think, honestly, the hearts and minds of the American public, even those who were rabid, foaming at the mouth, grab them all, lock them up, send them all back, there's a lot of softening of that. We spoke of the story of the Southwest, was it? Missouri rural town, very pro-MAGA, how the arrest of an Asian woman who had been serving patrons at a cafe there for years and years and years. She got snapped up, and all of a sudden they're like, not our, I forget her name, not our state. They have like an American name for her, but her real name was, something way more ethnic. Not our Mary or whatever her name was. Beth or what, I forget what it was. I could just look it up, I guess. Laziness on my part. But it's even happening nearby here in Dalton, Georgia. I'll get to that here in just a little bit. No, you know what? Let's do that now. Let's go to Dalton, Georgia. This story filed, who did this? The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Patricia Murphy, actually. she sat down with a few different folks from Dalton, Georgia, and notes how the temperatures changed in Dalton. She wrote, for the first installment of my 2025 Georgia Politics Road Trip series, I headed north out of Atlanta to Dalton, about 75 miles northwest of Atlanta. The carpet capital of the world, she writes, makes 85% of all the carpet in the world, and a huge portion of its flooring, too. The conservative area is such a GOP stronghold that President Donald Trump held a rally in Dalton in 2021 and won surrounding Whitfield County with 72% of the vote. Marjorie Taylor Greene's congressional district. That's all you need to know. But the Ruby Red County is also 38% Hispanic, with a majority Hispanic population inside the Dalton city limits. It doesn't necessarily mean they all get to vote, but that is still the majority of the population in the city of Dalton. How does the thriving manufacturing city feel about Trump's signature issue of immigration enforcement, knowing that the Hispanic population there is filling a huge number of jobs in the area, she asks. What about the recent workplace raids in places like farms and meatpacking plants, she asks. The drive off I-75 east towards Airport Road tells the story of who and what Dalton is today. As the 4-lane roads become 2 lanes, hulking factories give way to small businesses and markets. The language on the signs changed too, from English to Spanish. Instead of Chick-fil-A and Arby's, it's taquerias, and I'm going to slaughter this word. I took 3 years of French in high school instead of Spanish. I was stupid. And I don't remember a bit of the French either. Taquerias and carnicerias. I don't know what those are. I met America Gruner, Patricia Murphy writes, in a strip mall between El Ranchero restaurant and a Medicina natural pharmacy at the Hispanic-focused nonprofit she founded in 2006, Coalición de Líderes Latinos, the Coalition of Latino Leaders. CLILA. SLELIA. Why am I even trying to pronounce what is an acronym? Began as a way to organize and educate the Hispanic population in the area and has grown to offer English and citizenship classes, homework clubs for kids, business trainings, and free legal consultations. But since February, shortly after Trump was sworn in for a second term, everything in Dalton has changed, Gruner said. By the way, I've reached out to America. I'd love to have America on at some point in time, and we'll see that happens. We see everyday reports of people being detained, she said. The community now is afraid of going to the store, going to work, or going about their lives. Patricia Murphy notes the high-profile incident that we spoke about with Ximena Arias Cristobal, the 19-year-old Dalton State student who was detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, after being mistakenly stopped and arrested in Dalton last month by authorities. Arias Cristobal was eventually released on bond, but Gruner said most of the people she knows in Dalton who have been detained are still in confinement without their families knowing what's next. And likely in that same facility in Folkestone we just talked about, where people are sleeping on the floor because they don't have enough beds, they don't have enough room in the facility to make them hospitable. Gruner and CLILA now spend their days trying to spread the word amongst Hispanic residents in the area, both documented and undocumented, about how to avoid being stopped by authorities and what to do if they are. She said, know your rights. Don't drive without a license. Make a family plan. Above all, do not answer the door. You never know who's on the other side. Murphy writes, if it seems like a siege mentality, that's what it feels like. Even as we sat in her office, a text message popped up on her phone warning that ICE officers were nearby in Calhoun. It was one of the many false alarms she said she sees every day, but the fear of the community makes anything seem possible. It's very stressful, but at the same time, what motivates me is that this is not fair, she says. It is based on lies, on hate, and I see the suffering of the families every day. It's a different world 10 minutes away in busy downtown Dalton, Murphy writes. That's where I met Casey Carpenter. Casey has been on this show, by the way, Republican state lawmaker. Patricia Murphy met him for lunch at his restaurant, the Oakwood Cafe. Carpenter also owns a pizza restaurant further down the historic street, along with a hotel, the Carpentry, across the road. And despite the fact that he is a Republican, state representative, and a Trump supporter, he is also deeply troubled by the president's immigration policies, especially the recent raids around the country. Casey Carpenter, Republican, Trump supporter, not wild about the temperature in the immigration proceedings that are happening in his town. I still think Trump was the best choice, Carpenter said. Do I think this particular piece of his platform is going for our community? I don't. That's a Republican, an elected Republican. This is why we tell the story of Mario Guevara. This is why we talk about the detention facility. This is why we talk about the cruelty is the point. Well, if the cruelty is the point, it's also going to alienate even Republicans elected Republicans like Casey Carpenter, who said, those aren't people who are here to take your job or hurt you. They're just living life, trying to do the best they can for their family. Yes, Casey, that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. That's why it's more sensible to work on causation, root causation. Why are people fleeing their home countries versus being inhospitable assholes to them once they arrive here, instead of asking, well, what's wrong? Why did you come here? I mean, if your neighbor were pounding down your door and breathless, and you saw smoke and soot, and they're just all singed and whatnot, and you open the door, are you going to ask, what's going on? Or are you just going to run them off? Get out of here. Get off my porch. What would be the hospitable thing to do? What would be the neighborly thing to do? What would Jesus do? Patricia Murphy continues, the Republican has taken withering heat from conservative activists in Whitfield County, including a censure from the GOP, who say Trump's mass deportations are the way to go. But Carpenter said that's not living in the real world. This is like straight out of like conversations I had on this show last year. Anybody you know in construction or landscaping or farming will tell you this country would not work without these folks. Casey Carpenter, elected Republican, said. And so when you spew all this hate across the board against people and accept them for criminals who are here to take stuff, it's simply not true. I like Casey Carpenter. I've said that before. I've had him on this show, and I said that to him. I like you, dude. We could get along. I could go up to Dalton and have lunch with him, just like Patricia Murphy did, and we'd have a great conversation. Maybe I should, you know what? I've only had Republicans on this show a couple of times. Maybe I should broach that more and have Casey on, because I feel like that's an important conversation. When you see a Republican that you can have some commonality of ideas with, you sit down and you should have a conversation with him, right? Carpenter tells Patricia Murphy, ideally, he said, he'd like to see the southern border closed and dangerous criminals deported. I mean, we don't disagree with that. But he also wants a path to legal status for the vast majority of immigrants working and living peacefully in the United States. Murphy writes, as a state representative, he said he gets 5 or 6 calls per week from families asking for help for a friend or family member who has been detained. It's just heartbreaking, he said. See, with Casey, the cruelty isn't the point. He's one of those rare Republicans. Beyond the emotion of it all and the potentially devastating consequences for businesses, Carpenter said Republicans in the area will also have a heavy price to pay if Trump's aggressive raids and mass deportations continue. He says the Hispanics are more likely to be Republican than they are liberal. I have said this for a while. They're a conservative lifestyle. Catholics tend to live a more conservative lifestyle. They check 9 out of 10 boxes. He's right. The only box is, I'm sorry you deported my uncle. I'm never going to vote for you. We'll lose them for 50 years. With that, Carpenter pushed back from the table and headed across the street to his next meeting, past the cashier up front and a Radiate Jesus sign on the door. The news on the car radio brought word of more immigration crackdowns across the country to come, and I was off to my next stop on the road. I'll include that in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. I have more on Dalton. We can talk a little bit more about Dalton and the impacts that Trump's mass deportations and immigration raids are having on the minds of those voters. Do have to take a quick break. We'll come back. It's The Ron Show, America One Radio, progressive voices via TuneIn. All right, we're in the home stretch. Today's Ron Show. Thank you so much for listening. I want to go back to the ICE detention facility, the conditions literally on the ground, the concrete floor at the facility in Folkestone. A story that Latara Greenspan filed. It was yesterday, as a matter of fact. Again, he spoke to a couple of former, actually, detainees in that facility, Hosea Arias Tovar and his teenage daughter, Zemena, who were both housed in the detention facilities. And for some context, he says, as of June 9th, the average daily detainee population inside the South Georgia jail stood at 1,828, according to ICE data collected by the TRAC. That would be, what was the name of that organization again? The Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse at Syracuse University. Stewart's capacity is 1,752 detainees. Again, as of June 9th, the average daily detainee population at that facility was 1,828. So we're looking at, 48, it's about 75, 76 more than the facility's capacity. It's not glaring. Nationwide, the federal government is currently holding more than 50,000 people on ICE detention, or in ICE detention, a roughly 25% increase since January. That far exceeds the 41,500 cap for which the agency is funded. Okay, there's where you're coming in with the food issues and rationing. And Amilcar Valencia helps lead El Refugio, a Stewart County nonprofit that works to support immigrant detainees and their loved ones. He said his organization is consistently hearing about Stewart detainees being housed in rooms with 100 people, but only 60 or 70 beds. I mean, it's just horrible, he said. The overcrowded conditions just make it hard for anyone who is detained there. But remember, the cruelty is the point. Brian Todd, a spokesperson of Core Civic, the private prison operator that runs Stewart, said in a statement that detainees receive, quote, 3 nutritious meals a day, and that all have access to a bed. I mean, I guess if you're sleeping head to foot with someone else, maybe, I guess. I don't know. He added that the company adheres to all applicable federal detention standards. I'm sure they're great, by the way. But did not dispute the Stewart detainee inmate population numbers presented by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He said, we care deeply about treating people in our facilities humanely and providing them with a safe, clean, and dignified environment as they prepare for the next steps in their immigration process. ICE did not respond to requests for comment. Greenspan continues. More pressure on Stewart and other detention facilities is likely forthcoming. The Department of Homeland Security recently confirmed that the administration increased its immigration arrest quota from 1,800 to 3,000 people each day. If these facilities are already overcrowded and the quota went up by 165% or so, that's not good for the facilities or those who are in them. The GOP legislative package currently working its way through Congress, the big beautiful bill, seeks to infuse the Trump administration with significantly more funding to carry out mass deportations, or his pledge. The House-passed budget bill would unlock more than $150 billion in additional funding over 5 years for the Department of Homeland Security, including $59 billion for immigration, detention, and transportation. It has been confirmed that bigger detention infrastructure will be coming to Georgia. Last week, local officials in Charlton County near the Georgia-Florida border approved plans to expand an existing ICE jail into the nation's largest with a capacity to hold nearly 3,000 detainees. With this expansion, Georgia will strengthen its status as a national leader in the fight to secure our southern border, Buddy Carter, Republican congressman, said in a statement. By the way, he wants to nominate Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. Lips firmly planted on the cheeks of El Presidente. The enlarged facility in Folkestone, quote, will bring jobs and economic growth to our region, and I will continue to support our brave ICE agents as they seek to restore law and order, the congressman added. The Trump administration, do you just see like my eye, that pregnant pause is my eyes going, The Trump administration has also turned to federal prisons to hold some ICE detainees, the Bureau of Prisons said in February. In Atlanta's federal penitentiary, the number of people detained over immigration violations increased from 5 in February to 51 in early June, according to ICE data collected by Track. Among the immigrants newly targeted for arrest, detention, and deportation are people who entered the country without authorization in recent years, availing themselves of humanitarian pathways created under Biden. That includes roughly 950,000 immigrants who had used a government app to schedule appointments with federal officers and legally cross the border. Now, there is the fact that the second that Donald Trump was sworn in, that app was shut down. According to Marty Rosenbluth, one of the sole private immigration attorneys working in the remote part of Georgia where Stewart is located, immigrants who arrived in the U.S. via the app are not able to apply for bail when detained by ICE, prolonging their stays in custody. Some of its clients find themselves in that situation, saying it's completely counterintuitive. You try to enter legally, and then this is the catch. The cruelty is the point. Immigrants deemed ineligible for bonds must wait in detention for their case to come before a judge inside Stewart's immigration court, located in the same compound as the detention center. And because the number of detainees is steadily climbing, wait times for hearings are also going up. The cruelty is the point. ICE is using incarceration as a litigation strategy, he added. Marty Rosenbluth. Yeah, I guess they are. They're trying to incarcerate people under these horrendous conditions so that they just want to quit on their case, give up, and go home. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses so I can lock them up. Earlier this month, the Stewart Detention Center made news when staff found a Mexican detainee dead by apparent suicide. Pro-lifers, where are you? Before the Mexican man's passing, there had been 2 confirmed deaths by suicide at Stewart since ICE began detaining immigrants there in 2006. This is a worthy story to tell, to share. And as I do in every episode, if this is your first time listening, understand, I always put my show notes together with each podcast. RonShowATL.com. Each show, you get links to everything that I cite. So that, one, my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Vaught, if she's still around and still, I know she's not checking up on me, but I was taught to cite your sources, right? At a very early age, when you're doing reports, cite your sources. You got to do a bibliography. You got to cite your sources. So I cite my sources. One, and again, I'm a J school dropout, who, by the way, used to publish his own newspaper, used to write for the Augusta Chronicle, used to write for the Athens Banner Herald, has written for online publications. I just note that that's what you do. You cite your sources. But I also do that because I want you to have the same information that I have so that you can share it with those who you believe should know these stories as well. Casey Carpenter, an elected Republican in Ruby Red, Whitfield County, Dalton, Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene country. I remember him saying something to me on the call that he was on with me the one time I called his office to discuss something, and he took the call and he was on the show. He was just a gracious guy. I'm talking about a Republican. Yeah, no. And I mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene, and he kind of tried to say, oh, you'd be surprised what she and I don't agree on. I'm telling you, telling these stories, the horrendous conditions at these detention facilities, the abandonment of First Amendment principles, the flimsy arrest of Mario Guevara, the horrific conditions at these facilities that lead to suicides, the prolonging of the cases being seen, the gumming up of the system. These are stories that need to be told because there are more Casey Carpenters on the right, and there are plenty on the center. And if that's the case, then we who believe that a compassionate immigration policy that meets modern needs and standards has to come to fruition, we are the majority. We are the majority. Not just a slim majority. We are the vast majority of this country. The Tom Holman mindset, the Donald Trump xenophobic, anti-brown, anti-Hispanic, they are not the majority of this country. They have control, but they are not the majority of this country. And it would stand to reason then that if that is the case, we just have to all get our shit together and work together to at least get back to a point where both sides, need I say again, had an immigration bill that both sides were relatively happy with, would have passed, had a candidate who needed an issue to continue to galvanize his base on during a presidential campaign, not weighed in with some spineless senators who were concerned about not winning re-election or getting primaried in their next election, caved, withered, like the feckless weaklings that they are, under the pressure of said candidate. Donald Trump doesn't like to solve problems. He likes to, I don't even know that he likes to create, he just does. He creates problems and then glues the platter back together after shattering it to say, look what I did. It's a beautiful mosaic of a platter we used to. Anyway, that is going to do it for today's Ron Show. I want to thank you so much for listening and encourage you to listen again. Weekdays, 9 a.m., 5 p.m. on America One Radio, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or if you take this via podcast, that's fine. Follow the show wherever you podcast. Show notes, again, at RonShowATL.com. Back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Have yourselves a great Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow.